Hello, this is the non-dual lectionary for the first Sunday after Epiphany in year A, which is also the baptism of our Lord. We have Matthew's version of the Jesus baptism story, and it's very similar to Luke's version, which I talked about last year during year C. So I'll link to that in the comments, but also doing these stories again, it, among other things, gives us a chance sometimes to look at something with a little more depth or from a slightly different angle. So I'm going to point out something and take a slightly different take this time. So let's take a look. It's a short lesson for this week. Matthew chapter 3, verses 13 through 17. Then Jesus came from Galilee to John at the Jordan to be baptized by him. John would have prevented him, saying, I need to be baptized by you, and do you come to me? But Jesus answered him, Let it be so now, for it is proper for us in this way to fulfill all righteousness. Then he consented. And when Jesus had been baptized, just as he came up from the water, suddenly the heavens were opened to him, and he saw God's Spirit descending like a dove and alighting on him. And a voice from the heavens said, This is my Son, the beloved, with whom I am well pleased. So, I was talking about Luke's version of this story, and again, I'll link that in the description. Um, there's a lot of things that jump out here. This is kind of a classic description in this mythological context of a waking up experience. There's something about, John being the initiator here. And that's all rich stuff, real good. And again, like a really mythologically rich story. But I think we can go one more step. There's something else I want to kind of focus on here, which is, what exactly happens in this waking up experience, right? And in that context of one of the themes that I talk about a lot, which is like this idea of identity, right? And the notion of an identity transplant or, some completely different way of defining this I am, right? And so here in just a very short, 5 verses, right? I think we can see that full move. So right at the beginning, we've got John and Jesus talking to each other, and we can see that as sort of they're each kind of speaking from, in a sense, their like psychological self, their role, the way that they see themselves, right, as a self. John saying, "I need to be baptized by you. You come to me," and Jesus says, "Not, I mean, we could read it in lots of ways, but one way to read it is not from a non-dual or an awakened perspective, but saying like, hey, this is the way it should be now, in the way that I see my role going forward. But then when Jesus is baptized, he has this waking up experience, and the voice that seems like it comes from somewhere else, right? Which is pretty cool. Talks about a whole different identity, right? Not something about you've done this, John, you're the person who does this role. Jesus, you're the person who does this role. But this is my son, the beloved, right? So the identity, one, it's not based on any doing, any role, I am Jesus, I am from this place, I am a carpenter, or I am a teacher, or whatever I am, right? Just this is my son, the beloved. Um, and and if we, read that as again a waking experience that really does open up this new identity there, then that's a sign not of that's a way of signifying, right? Again, in this mythological context of the time, we might put it differently this way, or that ourselves if we had a similar experience today. But in this context, like, oh, my core, the I am that I am more than anything else, right, is as a son, a child of God. And as Alan Watts said, that kind of kicked off that I talked about in kicking off this whole project, right? Is, Jesus came as a son of God to show everyone that they are also children of God. And so here, and then in this event, right, in this waking up experience, we have Jesus, realizing, recognizing his, in a sense, right, true nature as a child of God, as the core of his emness, his being, beyond any other definition, beyond any other role, beyond any other sense of self. And then this initiates his teaching, right? His ministry in the world, right? Which is one way of looking at it is to then show everyone else the same thing, right? Or to lead everyone else to the possibility of the same recognition. So always, right, a really cool story, um, pointing to something that's available to all of us, right? That, our true nature is in this kind of language as a child of God, right? That's what already is. And so then the whole journey from here is just, how can we recognize, how can we realize what does it look like to act that and be that in the world? And that's the rest of the Jesus story again.